So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio.
Can I just say for a second, I am in shock right now at the possibility of my childhood shutting down. Have you heard Chuck E. Cheese may be closing all of its restaurants? I don't know. It's still yet to be determined. But we're talking about the childhood dreams and joy and too much candy and arcade games and scary Chuck E. Cheese shows with his comrades. I don't even think that they still do those stage shows anymore, actually. Last time I went to a Chuck E. Cheese for a kid's party, I don't remember seeing the stage with the Chuck E. Cheese actors. But with COVID, it's yet another Rona kind of casualty here that we're seeing may come about. So stay tuned. 47 states here in the U.S. have had Chuck E. Cheese for wonderful birthday celebrations and pizza. You can let us know if you like the pizza or not on Twitter. But just kind of a shocking moment for me. I thought I'd just process it out loud so that we can all process this together. In the meantime, coming up today, I'm really excited for our guest to be back here, a new regular here on Trending, Cristina Pineda. She is one of the co-founders and Matchmakers with her organization, Matchmakers in the City, working in Los Angeles, New York City, San Francisco, and many other places here in the United States. If you'd like to weigh in on the conversation today, ask a question, you can do two things. You can send us a message on social media. You can reply to my story on Instagram or send us a tweet to connect with those social media platforms. Just head over to relevantradio.com/trending and you can connect with all of the social media there. You can also give us a call at 1-888-914-9149. We'll be talking just a little bit about dating cleanses, Khloe Kardashian. If you've not been keeping up with the Kardashians, we're actually going to have 2 days in a row of keeping up with the Kardashians. I don't even watch the show, but there's some interesting things to talk about, from dating cleanses to our topic tomorrow about freezing your eggs, which a lot of women are finding they're under pressure to do. Even if they don't have the baby fever, some people are encouraging it. We'll also talk about the problem in dating of not moving on from past relationships. We'll talk about virtual dating and also how to discern whether or not a guy is a future fiance or if he's really just looking for a booty call. I'm not sure if that's clean to say on air, but I went there, so we'll see. Send your complaints. Again, I told you where to go if you want to send in your questions here on social media today. I'm interested by this article that was sent my way about Reese Witherspoon. So she has been quite the phenomena the last year. She has been in so many shows. I mean, we're even seeing a reboot of Legally Blonde. I think like movie number 3. Who knows if it'll actually come out with all these movie premiere delays. But Reese Witherspoon, I think, has been in like 3 different television shows between Hulu, Apple TV, Apple Plus, whatever it's called. I'm not really sure. I'm starting to get all these platforms wrong. I'd be curious how much the average person spends on streaming platforms. We've got Prime, we've got Plus, we've got Disney Plus, we have, I mean, I could go on Netflix, Hulu, and then you subscribe to channels, even on Amazon Prime. Like, come on, I know you're subscribed to Hallmark. We definitely are here. But here's Reese Witherspoon, and she talked about 2 things that really stood out to me. One, with her desire to tell more stories about women, I started to realize that what was more fascinating than her desire to tell stories about women right now is that she's being the change that she wants to see in the world. And she doesn't have this entitled attitude when she approaches it. Second, she's actually said some interesting things to Nicole Kidman, actress Nicole Kidman, about death that even put Nicole Kidman on her toes and shows that Reese is a churched individual who's appealing back to her church roots and maybe might give us a little bit of an understanding as to why Reese understands she has a value in this culture. And I'm not just talking the fact that she has tout, because she has financial value and an ability to contribute, but she makes things happen when she wants to see things change. So Reese Witherspoon was recently featured in this LA Times article, And I was fascinated first. It opens up with a conversation interview of Nicole Kidman, her co-star on one of the shows that she's currently in. And essentially, Nicole asked Reese Witherspoon, actress Reese Witherspoon, at one point, "Do you ever think about dying?" And Reese essentially, in response to Nicole Kidman commenting that she thinks about dying all the time, said, "Nope." I'm paraphrasing. Nicole Kidman says, she says, "Nope, I don't think about it because I know where I'm going." And Nicole Kidman, comments that she wishes she has the same type of certainty. And that Reese just doesn't really fear things because she has that certainty in her life. Now, we actually get a pretty good glimpse into why does Reese have this confidence, even when talking to her own children about death in the midst of the coronavirus. And I think that this goes back to her own comments that she makes about her faith ultimately being attributed to her Episcopal upbringing in Nashville. And for however 9 years in her upbringing, she went to church every Wednesday and Sunday, and she even sang in the church choir. And so Reese ends up commenting, she says, quote, "I don't have a lot of fear, that's true. There's a time and a purpose and a place, and I don't fear death because I know there's a heaven. I know it." I find it fascinating, this Legally Blonde actress, now well known for the morning show and other shows now, is essentially commenting about faith in a culture that is terrified by the coronavirus, is terrified by protests. We're scared inside. And yet she's saying, yeah, I'm not afraid of dying. Sure, she might be, staying at home with her family, but she doesn't really have that sense of fear. She even talks about how many people have repressive experiences with regard to religion, but she says that she herself never felt that way. And actually, in her religious experiences, she says, "I felt this incredible acceptance and that everyone has a gift and that we're all God's children. And your purpose in the world is to find the gifts that God gave you." I think this is a message that a lot of people need to hear. That God created you, He loves you, and you have a specific contribution to give to the world, but who you are really matters. And she has this just utmost confidence in heaven that I think is really neat to see. Now, of course, it does matter how you interact with the world. God has redeemed the human race, opening up those gates to heaven, but you and I are still in the midst of the responsibility to cooperate with God in working out our salvation. Because salvation is case by case. And our conduct here on earth ultimately determines it, what we do up until the point of death. Now, in this Los Angeles Times article, Reese Witherspoon also comments that she doesn't really like entitled women. And I thought this was interesting because here's someone who just a few years ago, 4 years ago, back in 2016, ended up founding her own new organization company called Hello Sunshine because she wanted to create female-driven content. And essentially, she especially works with other women to produce each other's work that they want to see, whether it's starting a book club, creating a film, creating a television show, you name it. She's really working on that. And it's interesting because I think it's so easy for us to look around and say, well, this needs to change about the world. I want to participate in that project, but there are no opportunities out there. There's no one speaking up for the things that I believe in. Yet Reese Witherspoon, after meeting with numerous executives of studios, realized that she wasn't seeing the stories that she necessarily wanted to be portrayed about women. Or maybe they said, well, we've got one story this year and it wasn't enough to her. And I'm not saying whether or not I agree with all this female-driven content. Honestly, unfortunately, a lot of our female-driven content is overdone and is emasculating toward men, and I think a lot of women are also kind of sick of it. But Reese Witherspoon is saying, you know what? She's showing by how she lives her life to be the change that you want to see in the world. And I think that's an important reminder for each and every single one of us. She's a perfect example of someone who's even commented about her own experiences in her career and challenges she herself has faced as being a woman in the entertainment industry. She's commented that agents have told her to never play a mother because it would essentially age her and ruin her career, because then she'd always be the mom in future movies. She disagreed with it, and she did it anyways. She was also told by an advisor to really make sure she started saving in her 20s and 30s, because by the time she hit 40, she probably wasn't going to be getting that many gigs. This brings me back to the comments I was making yesterday about beauty. If you'd like to listen to that episode, just head over to relevantradio.com/trending where you can access the podcast. You see, we have this understanding about beauty that our only contribution essentially evaporates and has a ticking time bomb on it when beauty is fleeting, that is exterior beauty. But I think there's something infectious about Reese Witherspoon, and that's part of the reason why she's become so popular. She's bubbly. She tries to make the changes she wants. She doesn't complain about not getting this opportunity or that opportunity. In fact, she says to this day, a lot of people don't call her up to offer her some movie gig. She has to fight for what she has. It's a good reminder for each of us to be the change that we want to see in the world, but also to chase after the things that we would like to accomplish. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. Thanks for joining us. Joining me in just a second here will be Cristina Pineda of Matchmakers in the City. First, a message about our sponsors. Solidarity Health Share is simple to help pay for affordable, quality health care. They enable the community to share in each other's eligible medical expenses. You choose the doctors that you want to see. Even integrative and alternative medical treatments are eligible. Solidarity Health Share helps pay for NAPRO technology and costs associated with natural family planning. Solidarity Health Share is dedicated to both faith and your health care. Information is available at solidarityhealthshare.org. Cristina Pineda is here with us, and we're going to be diving into, first and foremost, why a dating cleanse is so important, and then also a little later on, doing things such as discerning whether or not a guy wants a booty call or if he's future fiancé material. Welcome back here to the show, Cristina.
Thanks so much for having me, Timmerie. I'm so excited to dive into the amazing topics that you've chosen for today.
Well, it's totally inspired by a conversation you and I had not too long ago in the work you're doing as a matchmaker with your company, Matchmakers in the City. And you were talking about how sometimes a dating cleanse is really necessary. And even, for example, we've seen people such as Khloe Kardashian having recently gone through one. Share with us a little bit about what Khloe did and how you actually recommend to a lot of your clients that they too go through a dating cleanse.
Sure. Well, I think the whole Khloe Kardashian date cleanse also just goes right in line with what you were saying about Reese Witherspoon. And I think when Khloe said this to her mom was really upset and fearful of, why are you doing this? Why are you not dating? Are you going to get your eggs frozen? That's exactly what Kris Jenner said to her. And when I was diving into it, Khloe was very brave to say, you know what? I need to take some time away from dating. I want to focus on my daughter. I want to focus on myself and not get in the way that a lot of people can, especially women who are nearing that age of, oh, I should have been married already. I should have had children. That's what the cultural narrative often tells them. And they get in this hamster wheel of dating and meeting men who may not be right for them. But I know, especially with one of our bachelorettes, she went through that exact pattern, and a date cleanse was the only thing that made her stop in her tracks and notice the unhealthy relationship patterns that she kept doing over and over again. She really wanted to get married. She had that fear in her mind of, okay, if I don't do it now while I'm this age, young, pretty, whatever it is, then I'm never going to get get it. And of course you do want to, if that desire for marriage is in your heart, you should go after that. You should chase it, just like you said about Reese Witherspoon and chasing those desires that the Lord has put into her heart. But this bachelorette was just always basically addicted to that romantic attention from men, and she just kept dating these quote unquote Christian men who talk the talk but failed to walk the walk. And they may go to church, they may be active in the Catholic young adult group. I'm just thinking of a few men who she had told me that she had dated. And then when she finally came to me for date coaching, she realized, and I recommended to take some time away from dating to really take stock of who are you dating, why do you keep doing this to yourself and putting yourself in these relationships with basically children, men who are actually have never grown up.
Right. And it's challenging because a lot of women don't really know what to do. So tell us, what is a dating cleanse? What does that look like, and how can it play out in our own lives?
How I see it and what I recommend is you can do a date cleanse in different ways. Some women will do it for 40 days, and men can do them too. I just gave that example of a woman, but sometimes men need to do it too. You know yourself, and you know I've actually date coached a bunch of men who have done their own either self-imposed date cleanses, or maybe they didn't mean to, but they just didn't date for a while. That's what it is. But it can be 40 days is a good starter point. Right. And I think even my husband mentioned to me, I think I've done a few of those unintentional date cleanses in my life before I met you. So, yeah, I would say begin with the 40 days. Right. Exactly. So I would say, and I've done this myself. So everything I recommend in date coaching, I usually have done myself, and it's proven to work really well. The 40 days was what I started with, and I would do. Then I actually elongated it to 6 months. There are different books that you can get that walk you through these, or you can just work with me do date coaching sessions with me because I've already gone through the process and I know really what to recommend for it. But it's a period of time where you take away from dating. You're not thinking about, for men, pursuing women, for women, getting yourself out there. It's more focusing on your relationship with the Lord and your romance with the Lord. And that can be honed in many different spiritual practices, but some of my favorites are doing Eucharistic adoration, going on a pilgrimage. I know for mine, I went to a bunch of different monasteries all along the coast of Southern California, and I did any vacations that I would take, I would spend at a monastery and really focus on writing my devotional as I did this process to help me to connect with the Lord, know and learn how beautiful and special I am and everyone is in His eyes, and the kind of person who would honor that is very rare. But also, we talked about last time, and you can listen to that episode, the listeners can listen to that episode, but we did talk about how often we have a very maybe skewed image of who we think we should be with initially. But when you go on this date cleanse, the Lord will show you who the right kind of person internally and sometimes externally who He wants you with.
And Christina, it's interesting. If you're just joining us, that's Cristina Pineda. She's a matchmaker, co-founder of her company, Matchmakers in the City, which works with both the secular people, but also people of faith. Christina herself is a practicing Catholic, and I know you work a lot with your more Christian or faith-based clients. Now, you mentioned journaling when you were going on your own pilgrimages during this time, or attending adoration during your date cleanse. And I find it interesting because that processing period, kind of processing during the the dating cleanse process itself can be so important because, like you said, and we've talked about it before, sometimes people are kind of putting a big X on people who could be really good possibilities, or maybe they're not recognizing those good qualities and characteristics that they would actually like to see in the person they will date down the road.
Right, exactly. And that's why to establish that romance with the Lord, that relationship with him where you're really getting attuned to the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit's voice in your life, and we need to step back from our everyday busy lives where we're constantly, everyone wants something from us. And that's why with our members and with anyone who's single, I don't mean to chastise people if they feel like, yeah, I've been superficial in the past, or I haven't really thought about this in the past, because it's countercultural to take time away from dating, as we've seen with Chloe and her mom's initial reaction. And I know her mom wants the best for her, and those things are what she thinks are going to bring her happiness. I don't think she's
telling her to
trying to wish.
Oh, we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Right.
I saw that clip,
exactly.
Cristina,
Good.
And I was like, okay, whole nother conversation. But this poor girl, it's like parents sometimes, it's not just parents, but the culture, especially in like the Catholic culture, like, well, your biological clock is ticking, or in the secular culture, you better freeze your eggs, even if you don't have baby fever.
Yep. I know. And they think that they're being a good advisor when they're saying this. And I think partly it comes from maybe really wanting to see their child happy, and also partly wanting to have grandkids, more grandkids. But it is a lot of pressure for people to keep on that treadmill and not take the time and not know that the Lord, and this is for men too, that the Lord is the romancer of your life, that he is the only one who will fully complete us and make us happy. I tell this to our members all the time. And when you have that backbone and understanding that you don't need someone else to complete you. Yes, our hearts are longing for someone if you're called to marriage. I know for me, I felt a huge longing when I was single, and a lot of singles can relate to that. If you're feeling that longing, the Lord has really exciting plans for you in the future. But even for married people, he's still the primary romancer. So if you can spend time in your single life getting to know that and seeing those little things that he does for you, dancing. I have a little playlist of Christian dance songs that I recommend our members to just have and dance along and just enjoy being with the Lord like that, and singing and also noticing during your day where he touches our lives in those very specific ways that only he can. When you take time to step away and do an examination of conscience and examine and make these spiritual practices more of your daily life, like a lot of the mystics, they call them in our faith, in the Catholic faith, have honed those practices. We can learn so much from that, because we're all called to that kind of rich romance with the Lord. And when someone sees you, when a person sees you, you shine when you walk in the room. If you're just on the treadmill trying to get trying to get married, it's evident. But if you have that backbone of the Lord's just luminescence on you, of you are walking with him, people notice that, and that is irresistible in the dating world.
And Cristina, one of the things that you said, it continues to stand out, you have to slow down. in order to make this happen. And we're so
Yes.
busy. We're in such a fast-paced culture. And it's funny because you're talking about, people can tell, especially men, when you're kind of the person running on the treadmill versus the person taking care of their soul and their character. And I remember talking to a friend not too long ago and how she would go out with a grouping of friends. And she wasn't really someone who would go to a club, but she was with this group of friends that really wanted to go. And so there were two of them that weren't fans of going to the club, one who was. And so the two who weren't really, up on it, they weren't necessarily dressing as much the part as some of the other clubbers, yet they were the ones who were being hit on because they weren't just appealing to the physical desires of other people, but there was something about commitment that showed in how they were dressed. We'll be right back here with Cristina Pineda. She's a matchmaker from Matchmakers in the City.
We're talking about what you're thinking about. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
The Relevant Radio studio line is sponsored by Catholic Order of Foresters. Employment opportunities to become an agent or information about their flexible premium life insurance plans are available at relevantradio.com/Forester. Coming up in a little bit, we'll be talking about shame, body shame, nudity, and more. It'll be a fun, candid conversation, but I think there's a lot that we can take from our Catholic faith while addressing topics such as slut shaming and other topics surrounding nudity, especially among young people, as well as we're teaching various values to kids. Joining me is Cristina Pineda. She is the co-founder and a matchmaker with her organization Matchmakers in the City, found at matchmakersinthecity.com. Now, Cristina, I want to talk about a few things here. First, can you address, for those people who just have a difficult time with moving on, why is this such a problem when it comes to the dating scene? And does this inability to move on impact your clients quite often?
Yes, I love this question because it's so, people, when they make an impact in our lives, even if the person you haven't dated the person, it can touch your heart. And it can be very hard to move past that experience. And I don't even know if we're, in certain ways, you can ever truly get over, in quotes, a person if they've made an impact in your life. But you can move on from that person. And it's getting stuck on someone who you thought was your soulmate, that can be very difficult to work through, especially if you're coming from a place where this was supposed to be my soulmate, so I have to make it work regardless of what their behavior is towards me. That can be a very unhealthy way of proceeding in your love life, in your dating life. You want to make sure that you are taking stock of what this person's actions, behaviors are towards you, and then bringing it to the Lord and seeing the kind of person that the Lord wants for you. And that's why I have our members write a list of 5 internal qualities that they're looking for in their future wife and their future husband, so that they have that very important list and they can put whoever comes into their life up to that list and say, oh yeah, because we easily get distracted by the glitz and the glam, by the attraction, by the chemistry, all these words you hear. That's what people can, it's difficult to move on from that because you feel like, oh, I'm never going to have these feelings again. Right. But if you have your list, you're able to be more objective about it and say, actually, this person, we might have been very physically attractive, but he canceled on me twice, or she flaked on me when we were supposed to go out and I called her and she didn't get back to me after 2 days and said, oh, I'm sorry, I was working. So it's really important.
It's a good red flag.
Yes. And that's why I'm saying it's both for men and for women with moving on, because often we think about the heartsick girl who's a young woman.
Yeah.
Right, who's romanticizing the relationship, but men do it too. And that's why it's important to know that God has the best in store for us, not the second best. And in terms of behavior, if we ask for a good thing, he's not going to give us a snake. And I'm paraphrasing from the Gospel of Matthew here. But we have to trust that God is going to give us something greater than if someone was mistreating us, and know that it's time to move on. And then I think you wanted to talk a little bit about communication, Timmery, and what are ways of moving on from the person, and can you be in communication with them? Can you still follow them on social media? And I think those are great questions.
Yes, and before we jump there, I just want to make one comment, and it's okay as a friend to say this to people. I was once told, always date up, and that means moving on. And, sometimes I'll have these friends who are like so hung up on this person, because sometimes, especially in the Catholic dating scene, we have this attitude that like the first date means like, this is the person I'm going to marry. And sometimes I'll say, well, it didn't work out. They turned you down. So clearly this person isn't the person you're going to marry, and you need to get over it. And we kind of keep comparing and dragging that person along, and it really does get in the way, which is why I think talking about how much should we then communicate with past romances or even just one-time dates, and how should we interact with them on social media, Cristina?
Yes, I definitely think that if you've discerned that, or maybe just gotten rejected, discernment on your part or rejection from the other person.
Get the hint.
Communication should be turned off. And some people will say, oh, but I'm friends with all my exes, and think that that's a really good thing. But I don't agree. I think either. It's better. Yeah, and that may upset some people, but just in my experience, of seeing a lot of people, it's better to really close that door and not be rude to the person, but be polite, courteous with the person, but just say, if they keep reaching out to you, if he or she keeps reaching out to you, you can just say, you know what, I think so much, it was so great getting to know you, but I do think it's best that we stop communication. It's just, I want to meet the right person, and that would get in the way of that. If you're honest with them, that's very kind and polite to say, rather than just ghosting the person and being petty like that. Because you also, another thing that I think is pretty good advice is that person may not be the right person for you, but maybe one of that person's friends in the future might. So if you've ghosted them or been really rude to them, and when you ended the relationship, they will not have good things to say about you. Right. So it's best to end things cleanly, kindly, but firmly with your communication, rather than continuing to text just because you want some attention or
you want to be nice.
Exactly. Or just respond to them because you want to, right. We like to be liked. We like to people please, but this is an area that it's really going to get in your way. If that it's the train track theory. It's Alessandra and I talk about this all the time. Alessandra's the other co-founder of Matchmakers in the City. And we say, if there's a dilapidated train in your station, in your track, the Polar Express might be right behind that train, but it cannot come in because you have a train there. And if you're still talking and communicating with this ex or person who you know is not the right person for you, that Polar Express cannot come through.
I love that. The dilapidated train is getting in the way of the Polar Express that is on its way. And it's so important because sometimes we think, well, I'm just trying to be nice, so I'm allowing them to continuously contact me, or I'm trying to say hello, or I'm trying to check in. But really, it's a sign that you have not moved on, and you're allowing whatever emotional connection or your insecurity and your inability to get over some guilt when someone contacts you get in the way of moving forward and kind of moving on and seeing what other possibilities there are in your life.
Exactly. And it's trusting God that He will provide someone great for you after this, but you have to do your part and clear that train out.
And that's challenging, Cristina, in an age where we have so many emotional bonds and connections, not even getting into kind of the over-engagement physically, sexually too soon that kind of creates these chemical bonds, but even just the emotional bonds that are created via virtual dating when we're kind of talking to people too much and these romances come up. So let's talk about virtual dating. What are some do's and don'ts in an age, especially with the coronavirus, where people are still wanting to meet others and maybe they're not engaging, maybe a little more now, as much as they had been before?
Right. And we actually have a Dating in the City YouTube video about the do's and don'ts of virtual dating. So if someone, we have a few minutes to talk about this, but if someone wants the real deep dive on that, just go put that in YouTube and you'll find it in our Dating in the City show. But for virtual dating, we've seen them go really well or really badly. As my sister says, they can go well or really badly. And I'm just thinking of one specific experience where the man just looked disheveled, may have looked disheveled on the date, didn't treat it as a real date, and he didn't maybe comb his hair like he would for a normal date or wear something. This is not the work from home look that you should be presenting on your virtual dates, people.
No Zoom accidental walk-ins here from the family.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Or the roommates or anyone else, unless it's a cat. Or if a cat walks in, that's fine. But that, we've had extraordinary virtual dates though, and those are with people who have taken the time beforehand to look at what the lighting looks like, to make sure that they're front lit rather than back lit, to, as a woman, do your makeup even more than you would on a normal date, because the lighting and the cameras, it's so much more, I guess, harsher in terms of how you're presented. It will look like I could be wearing a full face of makeup, and if I'm doing one of our YouTube shows, and I will barely look like I put on a little bit of eyeliner. Right. It's important to make sure you check that out and try it out before you actually do your date. Test it out. For women, for the makeup; for men, your full presentation. What are you showing behind the screen? Is it an unmade bed? Is it... What are you presenting? You want to make sure that you take this like you would on a normal, you treat it as a normal date, get dressed up, wear your favorite cologne, wear something that makes you feel great, even if they can't see your pants. Just wear something good, and then you'll put your best foot forward. You'll feel more like it's a date rather than an at-home pajama sesh.
And these things are important, and it's not about creating a fake facade. It's about showing your best, enhancing features, when the reality is that the photo from a camera isn't the real you. And so sometimes you need to help that along, not be fake and superficial, but to move the ball forward in the process. If you're just joining us, you're listening to Trending with Timmerie. That's Cristina Pineda of Matchmakers in the City. Cristina, okay, here's the question that I think a lot of people have, especially women. How do you tell the difference if a guy is really a future fiance or if he's just looking for a booty call?
Okay, that is a great question. And especially it can be difficult during the virtual times because you're not really sure. You're not meeting up in person. In some cities you can. But one of the telltale signs that he's just looking for a booty call is if he's not actually making plans with you. And that maybe he's just texting you sporadically or texting you during the day, and he won't actually go for the date. And also, if he's sporadic hot and cold. To know if someone's looking for a fiance or looking for that special someone, that's a consistent man who is just, you can count on him. He's there. He makes plans. He sticks with them. A lot of guys who are just looking for a booty call will only communicate with you late at night. Will say, oh, come over. We'll only make plans last minute. And if you can't do it, we'll drop off the face of the earth for maybe a few days, and then he'll be back in your life. And then the minute those men learn that you are not that kind of woman and that you need to be planned, that you require a plan to move forward with anything with him, they usually drop off the face of the earth. And then if they don't, and they end up finally doing a plan, but usually they don't, and he might say, oh, you're free tonight. And you said, finally, I'm just going to go and try it. This is what happened with one of our bachelorettes. A guy was doing that to her, and she had this amazing connection when they met. And she wanted to go on a date. It's been a while. Quarantine's hard. So she normally wouldn't do night of dates, or day before dates. But she said, I'm just going to go. And she went there. They had, of course, the firework date. And then after that, they were talked a little bit about their faith, and it may have come up that her faith was really important to her. And I don't know if she brought up that she was saving herself, but that it made it pretty clear to him that this was not going to be what he thought it would be, and she did not go home with him. So she didn't hear from him again. And I'm really proud of her that she just stuck to her guns, even though you know how hard it is to, right. Ladies, we've been there. Well. Those men are hard to turn down. Right. But you have to just stick to your guns and stick to your faith, and know that you're much more important than a one-night stand, and that the Lord's going to give you someone who's consistent and pursues you. And if you say no to those things, he'll keep and usually they're not asking for a one-night stand if they're looking for the real deal. So if they get sexual or try to do that early on, that's another sign that he could be looking for a booty call.
Christina, I love this. It's refining your hookup radar in a hookup culture. And you want to see, you gave some real clear tips here. You want to see consistency in the person, someone who takes on responsibility, who makes commitments ahead of time. Some people say even that, if you don't make a commitment for me on Wednesday for the weekend, well then, you weren't willing to go there, and sorry, you're going to have to wait. And I think sometimes things like that are important because it shows that you're also not just playing hard to get, but there has to be effort made to take the time to do things the right way and to show that you're going to have that consistency. And so, sometimes you have to give them time to figure that out, and that's what your expectations are. But that example you just gave was great. She maybe was a little more willing to engage in a way that she normally wouldn't and going out last minute. But because she composed herself well, he got the picture. And I think that this is something that we have to offer other people when they see how we live our lives. Often they are going to adapt and either leave or try harder if there's someone who maybe didn't have the best intentions to begin with. Because sometimes the intentions might not be the best, but they can turn into something better if we're strong enough to handle those situations. That's been Cristina Pineda of Matchmakers in the City. Thank you so much for joining us, Cristina. People can find you at matchmakersinthecity.com. We'll be right back here on Trending with Timmerie.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
I am fascinated as we look around the culture right now with the kind of things surrounding gender identity, ideology, things surrounding abortion and contraception, sex positivity. You're seeing a lot about body positivity at the heart of this. And it's something that's being pushed a lot in sex education, but also it's not just among young people, but adults as well. And I understand that there's an underlying question that's being asked. what does the role of shame have to do with our interactions with our body and the culture? And I think most people think that shame is a bad thing because people associate shame with insecurity. People associate shame with, maybe feeling like a doormat, needing to be more modest, needing to make sure you're not exposed, and on and on. And I think that the conversation surrounding shame can be quite confusing. And I've been reading this book, which is really a pro-LGBTQ feminist approach to sex education for children. It's written by a feminist, Bonnie Rowe. She wrote the book Beyond the Birds and the Bees, and she has a very progressive modern attitude about teaching sexuality to children. And while there are some areas that I can say we would probably agree with her on, where she ends up with her application and kind of overall ending approach maybe isn't the best. She's trying to bring home, quote, a new message to kids about sex, love, and equality. Now, it's interesting because she often talks about what I would essentially refer to as her understanding of the utopia with regard to body image and shame and sexuality of what she experienced when she lived surrounded by people who were Dutch. And she talks essentially about her time living out of country, about how the Dutch culture has this openness about nudity. They're relaxed about sexuality. In fact, they're even okay with overnight slumber parties, essentially sex parties for people of the opposite sex in some cases. Now that goes too far, and I'll kind of throw that out for the sake of being able to hear the other things that she talks about. But she does mention good things, such as maybe we need to be more relaxed with young children changing in public, for instance, young children. And I mean, we've seen examples, I'll just throw this out there, where people have had Child Protective Services called on them for changing a child who's maybe 3 years old in public because certain people were uncomfortable with that. Now, again, I'm not going to get into the do's and don'ts, yes or no of that, but she talks about how maybe we are overly creating this confusion for a child by forcing them to cover up. I think that if we do it in the wrong way, I could see where she's coming from. It's creating a sense that the body is bad, which would be a puritanical understanding of the body. And you see, I think she thinks two things, that either the American culture is puritanical about approaching the body, or that maybe it's a little more, on the free side, but we still have a modest culture in the United States. And so realistically, she wants to throw out the United States attitude about nudity and shame and bring in this attitude where you could walk around naked and it's no big deal. And parents and children shower together no matter their age, and the children can grab body parts, and that's okay for teaching them about their body, even in their, might I say, middle school, 10-year-old age range. Again, I think that goes too far, but here are some, I think, important things for us to understand about the overall understanding of shame in a proper context. Especially if you look to the work of St. John Paul the Great and his work in Love and Responsibility when he was still a Cardinal Wojtyla. And he talks essentially about how shame is always connected to a person. And so because of that, you see, shame is always personal. And really, shame develops out of an interior need. The need to not feel objectified by another person, and the need to stop objectifying another person. The need not to feel objectified and the need not to objectify. And I think this is so important. At the fall, we saw one of the first things that Adam and Eve did was to cover up, because they understood that someone could take advantage of me and I could take advantage of another person. But you see, it's all about how we love. The goal is for love to be inspired within us. And shame arises when our love can be damaged or disfigured. Now, for men, often they feel shame with regard to their reaction physically to someone of the opposite sex, or even their mental reaction to a woman. But what's so beautiful is that a man wants to love so that he can show love. He wants to be loved so that he can show this. It's so important to him to have this experience of love, and vice versa. Women often feel shame because they feel objectified, yet love is at the heart of the conversation. Shame can be a good thing, but we have to allow it to build us toward a deeper conversation surrounding love.